Yo, I hope you guys are doing fantastic today. In this video, we're going to be going over a sword and shield DPS build in New World. Before we get too deep into the build, let's talk about why we even decided to create a sword and shield DPS build in the first place. We created a video a few days ago that talked about how Bane stacks on your sword and your shield. This does work. It does stack. It does a lot of damage. And I'll make sure to link that video down in the description below so you can see exactly what we're talking about. But after learning that, we decided to put this build together. And to my surprise, this thing is absolutely crazy. It does a ton of damage and is a blast to use, provides a ton of utility to your team as well. So what did we pair the sword and shield with? We paired it with the great axe just strictly for grav wells and maelstrom. The great axe provides a lot of utility and ended up pairing pretty well with this combination. So let's take a look at the abilities. We'll take a look first at the sword and shield, and the active abilities we are taking is going to be reverse stab. We're going to take whirling blade, and we're taking shield rush. We're not taking leaping strike because leaping strike really is just like single target damage. It doesn't really provide anything in terms of DPS. It's great mobility if you need to get out of situations, but we have the great axe for that on the back bar, so we didn't take leaping strike. Didn't think it was necessary in the build, and you'll see more about why later on in the video or towards the end of the video whenever we talk about the rotation and how we play this build. So here's what we took reverse stab for primarily, is really for the cooldown reduction. This is quite nice to have in the build. A lot of built-in CDR. Whirling blade does a lot of AoE damage, provides a nice little AoE rend. Yes, this rend isn't very strong. It's only a 5% rend, but it is an AoE rend nonetheless. And then you have the cooldown reduction. This ability is reduced by 10% for each enemy hit, which really provides a lot of uptime for whirling blade whenever you get in clumps, which is quite nice. Then you can also get like empowering whirling blade on your gear, which I would recommend because you do additional damage with this ability whenever you have that perk on your gear as well. And then the passives on this side of the tree, we took increased crit strike. We took successful heavy attacks grant you 30% empower. You are going to lead with heavy attacks for your combo whenever you run this to get that empower, so you can get the full amount of damage out of the combo. And again, we'll talk about that more at the end of the video. And then we took the final attack in your light attack chain to inflict slow. We took that because we are also taking opportunist, which deals 10% more damage to slowed foes, and you'll see that synergize more as the build plays out. Every time there's a slowed foe, we deal 10% more damage, so we want the enemies to be slowed as much as possible. Then we also took while full health, deal 15% more damage, and then we're taking of course leadership just to deal an additional 10% increased damage for the entire group. Then on the right side of the tree here, we're taking shield rush. This is quite nice because it does do a little bit of damage, 125% damage. It also staggers your enemies, but we really are taking it for the weekend here, for the utility that this provides. And then we also have a slow applied to relentless or to shield rush. So again, we have opportunist over here, so every time we apply slow, we're just going to deal additional damage. So we want the enemies slowed as much as possible. And then we're just taking some nice mitigation over here. We have sturdy shield and we have elemental resistance, and then we are taking the final blow, so we can deal 15% more damage in the third light attack chain. I thought this was going to cause problems at first because it does deal more threat. I didn't have any problems with that whenever we're running the M10, so I wouldn't worry about that. The additional damage you get is quite nice. And then we're taking recuperation just to get additional healing. All right, so now let's take a look at the great axe tree. So here's what we took for the great axe. We're taking charge strictly for the mobility that this provides. And again, the great axe is only used for utility. We're not using this for a lot of damage. We're using it for utility. So having the charge is quite nice, especially in expeditions like Tempest. If you kind of misplay and you're stuck out in the Neshatoon fight and you can't get away from the fire, from the explosions, you can just use charge and get away. You can also use this just to kind of pull yourself out of the fight if you need to. Just a utility ability. I didn't find myself using this a whole lot, but there wasn't really anything else I wanted to slot. You could slot reap if you wanted to, if you don't really care about the utility or the movement. Reap would be a fine choice as well. Then of course we're just taking things that enhance our damage a little bit. Greed, Death's Embrace, critical gains, keen edge, critical conditioning, and then feed. So all of these things are just going to kind of help our sustainability and increase our damage on the left side of the tree. And then this is really why we wanted to run the great axe over here on the right side of the tree, is for the gravity wells, for the big groupings. That's what we want. We want to just group the mobs together for this build, because then you can rush in and do your whirling blade, and you can perform your full combo and burn down packs of mobs quite nicely. And then of course maelstrom, and I would highly recommend trying to get a weapon with enfeebling maelstrom on there. That's going to pair really nice with shield rush, because then you can really weaken big groups of mobs, which is really nice in the expedition. And then we're just taking Mauler's Fury just because we are pushing down to that passive. And then of course center of attention and crowded protection for a little bit of extra damage and mitigation. And now we're going to come over here and take a look at our attribute split. So this is how I run this build. We're running 300 strength, 165 dex, and then 50 con. The reason we're running 50 con is because I have 36 points in equipment, so I can't push down to the 5 con mark with my current equipment on here. You could push down a 5 constitution if you're having problems surviving. I would push up to the 100 constitution mark, or maybe even the 150 if you're struggling. Then you can just pull your dex down a little bit, I would leave strength at 300. Having the grit on the attack is pretty nice, although the sword damage is split stats. You'd get more damage if you split stat like this, but having the grit is very nice in the expedition, so I'd recommend taking 300 strength and then pushing your dex down a little bit maybe. Or if you don't really care about the grit, you could obviously go like a 200 100 split and then put more in constitution if you wanted to. This is what I'm running though. This has worked really well. Now on to the gear that we were running. Bear in mind that this gear is not fully min-maxed at all. This is just a build we put together on the whim and it works really well. So some of this gear is going to have some really weird perks on there that don't even fit the build, but we will probably min-max this a little bit later and get the perks that we want on here. But this is the sword we're running. We're running Centurion's Blade. This comes from a quest in Brimstone Sands. This is like a free sword you can just go get, and it's actually quite nice. Corrupted Bane, Vicious, Mortal Refreshment. Mortal Refreshment could be replaced obviously with something a little bit better, but Corrupted Bane, Vicious, Mortal Refreshment is not terrible, and it's a nice free sword that you can get. And then we're running Corrupted Bane, Chainfire, Trenchant Strikes. Ideally, if you could min-max this, I would get Corrupted Bane, Enfeebling Maelstrom, and Thwarting Strikes on this great axe. That would be like a Abyss great axe for this build. Enfeebling Maelstrom and pairing that with the Shield Rush for the big weaken is going to be very nice. So that's what I would get if I could get a Abyss great axe, or if I decide to min-max it. But right now, this is what we're running with. And then for our gear, we're just going Ward. Again, this is very weird. We have Keen Vol Kick on here. I know that's a throwaway perk because this gear was just kind of thrown together. That's just what we had at 625 because we were running Spear a lot. But we have Keen Vol Kick on here, and then Corrupted Ward. We have Corrupted Ward, Elemental Aversion, Luck. This came from the winter event. I didn't have a light chest piece, so I just used the winter pattern to create that one. Then we have Physical Aversion, Corrupted Ward. We have Refreshing Evasion, Corrupted Ward. We have Physical Aversion, Corrupted Ward, Invigorated. And then on our shield, we have Fortifying Shield Rush, Corrupted Bane, and Sturdy. I would recommend getting Fortifying Shield Rush on here. It is nice because you get a 32% fortify for 6 seconds. Definitely helps your survivability when you're rushing into the mobs in the expedition. And then if you wanted to min-max this, you just want to get Corrupted Ward, Refreshing, and then a skill perk. That would be ideal. If you don't have all the skill, or don't want to get all the skill perks, or if there's not a lot of skill perks you want for this build, there probably wouldn't be, then your third perk is kind of subjective. But Corrupted Ward, Refreshing for sure. The two skill perks that I would get without a doubt, I would try to get Empowering Whirling Blade on a piece of gear. I would want Enfeebling Maelstrom on my great axe, and then I would want Fortifying Shield Rush on the shield. This shield here, unfortunately, Bane shields cannot be crafted, so you're gonna have to get this as a drop. So you can't be too picky with what perks come on the shield. You really just want to get Bane on the shield. This is kind of key to this build because you get Corrupted Bane on the shield and on the sword, and they do stack, so you just do a crazy amount of damage. And then for jewelry, we have on the Nature Ward because this week Tempest was nature. That's what we've been running a whole lot. And then we have Purify, Nature Protection, and Health. I really run this amulet strictly for the nature protection, and then the health. Purify is, whatever. This could be min-maxed a little bit better as well. I would like a better amulet, but nonetheless, this is what we have right now. Then we're running the Legate's Ring, Leeching Slash Damage, Keen Awareness was quite nice, and then the Doom's Chance Earring. And what I like to do here, the reason I have opals in my armor is because I like to run the Nature Amulet with the Nature Ward. This gives you about 28% nature resist. You could, if you're having problems surviving some of the mechanics in the expeditions, you could obviously slot elemental gems in all of your armor here as well, which would push you up to like 50 something percent elemental resistance for that particular mutation, and have an amulet as well if you wanted to. For me, I think having anything over 25% in your elemental damage resistance is fine. And then I slot opals. The reason I do it this way is because every week whenever the mutation rotates, all I have to do is swap out my amulet, my gear. I don't have to waste a bunch of money switching gems on my gear. But again, a lot of people like to really have a lot of elemental resistance because they have a hard time dodging the mechanics, so they get stuck in the mechanic or whatever. Or if you're in a pug group, you just never know what's going to happen. So better safe than sorry. You can just slot a lot of elemental resistance in here too. And we have a full video over how this works and why I decide to slot opals in my gym. I just gave you the quick rundown, but if you want to see the full explanation, I'll post a link to that video down in the description below as well. And then obviously, whenever you're running your mutations, you want to make sure you have all of your stat foods, your coatings, your honing stone, and all that good stuff to min-max your damage. And we use that whenever we were running this mutation too. So now on to the rotation and how this build actually works and how it functions and how you're going to play this build and why it's really good. This thing actually pumps out a lot of damage. I was quite surprised. So really what you're going to want to do is you want to lead with a heavy attack because you have empowered stab that's going to grant your heavy attacks 30% empower for 5 seconds. So if you lead with your heavy attack, you then want to use your whirling blade in the group of mobs. This is going to rend all of the mobs in that area. Then you follow up with a shield rush, That shield rush is then going to weaken all of the mobs and do quite a lot of damage, and then you hit a reverse stab to reduce your cooldowns, and then you kind of rinse and repeat. If there is a big group of mobs, you obviously are going to want to throw a Gravwell in there to group them up first, and then if you have Enfeebling Maelstrom on your Great Axe, you Gravwell, Maelstrom, and then you heavy attack with your sword into shield rush, into reverse stab, rinse and repeat. And if your cooldowns aren't up, then you just light attack away with your sword and deal quite a lot of damage. This was pretty nice. I was landing some heavy attacks for like 9k. I think the biggest one I did was like 9.3k heavy attack with the sword. That's not too terrible. The Whirling Blade actually performed way better than I thought it would. I was very surprised. I mean, it does deal 145% weapon damage, which is quite nice. I didn't have an empowering Whirling Blade on my weapon or on my gear when I was running this, and I was still doing a lot of damage with this ability. It was very nice. Shield rush with the weaken was nice, and just comboing this together with the cooldown reduction, I was able to keep a lot of my abilities up. Whirling Blade especially, because you reduce the cooldown of Whirling Blade 10% for each enemy hit. So whenever you have large groups of mobs, this is not quite as good as like Refreshing Torrent. You're not going to keep it up quite that much, but it is very, very good. And surprisingly, this build did a ton of damage and was an absolute blast to run. I've been running it a whole lot, and I will probably continue to run it. It's very much surprised me and has been super fun. I would highly recommend giving this a shot. But that'll do it for this one, boys and girls. Thank you guys so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. And as always, come hang out with us on Twitch, twitch.tv/BDLG. We're live there every Monday through Friday, 8 o'clock a.m. CST. Thank you guys again for hanging out. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video or just like New World content in general, please make sure to like and subscribe. That'll do it for this one. We'll see you in the next one.